This is going to be a long ass video. So it's going to answer a lot of questions though. Of course, every time you answer a question, the rule is that it creates infinite more questions for every question that you answer. But specifically, I have passed the torch on the JL stuff over to someone else locally. I don't want to name him because there's a lot of people that don't like me, and they'll like give the guy a hard time. And he's just starting out, and I want to, sort of coach him. There's nothing special about what he's doing, but he wants to do recones, and he wants to make good money. So there's a lot of my clients that are disabled, and they want to be able to work from home and do something that's cash based, so they can fucking keep their privacy, the biggest one. So I just want to help you guys figure out a lot of the things that are associated with this. When you finally understand it, and you do it maybe 1,000 times. Again, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this, about putting in your 10,000 hours as an apprentice, and just learning. A lot is trial and error, but you got to put in the time, and it's important to just be patient. And I think, gosh, it was I was in processing at my first base in the Air Force. This is 94 October in Honolulu. And I got to the finance desk, and, just by, again, sort of just going ahead until I hit something or mess up something. And then I ask, hey, where's finance? And then I found the finance desk. And the guy starts yelling at me. He's like, where's this? Well, why aren't you doing this? And I was like, and I said, hey, can I ask you something real quick? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I've never done this before. So can you give me a little bit of a break? And what do you know? His attitude changed. So he felt a little bit of compassion for me, because it was like, dude, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, and you, of course, in that environment, I can't curse. I can't say that. I can't be sort of, again, that's one of the reasons why I use vulgarity with you guys. It's to let you know that I'm trying to be as honest as possible. And people that tend to curb vulgarity tend to be more dishonest. And that's not something I made up. That's just the way it is, right? People that are hoity-toity, right? Like when I say hoity-toity, you know exactly what I'm talking about. People that act like they own you. And for the most part, they do. But you don't have to rub it in, right? That's what us little people, groundlings, that's what we don't like that. So, you can do that, I'll clean up your shit, but you don't have to shit on my face or shit in my mouth, So, but that's one of the reasons why I tend to use vulgarity, is because I want to bond with you, and I want to let you know that I have been through the ringer in many occasions, and I want to try to help you avoid some of that heartache. I had some guy, he was on the comment section bad-mouthing me and talking about how, robot's not really a school, or I'm not really running a school, that is some sort of tax dodge scheme or something like that. And I laugh because I wish he could watch the videos that I watch. I wish he could read the books that I read. And what I give to you is my interpretation of those things. So I'm 49, and this is what I've learned so far. Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know. And some people find insecurity in that. They're like, well, you should be the expert in this. It's like, well, I'm doing my best to be an expert, right? I've never lived life before. This is my first time around. This is my first go. What I have done is thousands upon thousands of rebuild and recones. And so I will share with you what I can. The rest is up to you to just learn by doing. And that's what I really encourage you guys to do. So I wanted to make a couple of observations. I didn't give him all these motors yet, just because I don't want to overwhelm him. He came over last week, and he got a whole bunch of JL stuff. It was like W3s, W6s, version 1.2. The only thing that I'm keeping is the W7s, and just because that's a higher end thing, and I there's plans that I have for those, so that's fine. But reconing loudspeakers can be rewarding, challenging, and it can help. You know, it's a good side hustle. And for me, the biggest thing was I just couldn't believe how expensive everything was. And again, I came from a poor background, working class, and some luxury item like this was completely out of range for me. And again, the only thing I ever bought retail was it was 1994. It was a Rockford Fosgate 4600X. It was their Series 1. It wasn't even like their Punch series or their Power series. And that was $200, and that was a lot of money for me. So did I turn it into a moneymaker? Yes, I did eventually. But that's what I want to get you good at, because once you start making money, buying something like this isn't so challenging. But it's also good to know that you don't want to be ripped off. So one of the things that you're going to find is when dealing with people that want specifically, so basically what this video is I'm going to address the people that want to recone JL audio products. Okay? So what you'll find is it's a mixed bag. So, and I just don't like dealing with them in general. That's my personal preference. I have other things that I'd rather do. I have other things I would rather, fight than to try to educate snobby white kids that they don't know any better, and they don't want to know better, and they get mad when you give them information that conflicts with what they've heard. So, but as a rebuilder, one of the things you're going to run into is people that are kind of middle class, and they like if they bought it new, chances are it's better that they just donate the dead one to you, and then you tell them to go buy a new one. That's the easiest thing. And when that happens, which that has happened to me several times, they feel better. So then, sometimes they'll ask me, hey, can you get a better deal? And I go, no, you can't, because, that's a proprietary network. You have to buy from a dealer. You might be able to get, a deal on a used one, but when you buy from eBay, it's hit and miss. And then you got to buy from a reputable vendor. And then next thing you know, it's like, when you're shopping like for Toyotas, like a used Toyota is almost as expensive as a new one. So you're like, fuck it, might as well buy a new one. So, but, so that's the top tier guy, the guy that you tell, you go, just go buy a new one. It's cheaper to buy a new one. And then, now again, it gets into sales recommendations, because if they made it to you rather than going to the JL dealer, you are the expert. So sometimes you can guide them in a different path. And that's where it's good to have alternatives. And alternatives can be anything from like let's say they had a W6, and you can suggest something like a Sundown SAV2, which is actually a better, stronger subwoofer than the W6. That's not an opinion, those are facts. It's a higher performance woofer. Now, if the guy likes the cosmetics of a W6, just walk away from him. You just go buy a new W6. If you can't afford to buy a W6, and this is where it gets weird, because it's typically a guy that wants to be cool. In my experience, it's 8 times out of 10, it's always been a black guy. And that's not like racist on my part. That's just my observation. Is this anecdotal evidence? Yes. But one of the guys that I talked to last week, he was telling me about how he was describing this guy that got violent with him and actually beat him up a little bit over some subwoofers. And I said, let me guess, it's a middle-aged black man with a blacked out Mercedes. And he goes, no, it was white. And I go, yeah, but the windows were blacked out. And he goes, yeah, they were. So what that is that's a man-child. That's a grown man that is striving for dominance over females, dominance over other males. He's trying to be in fashion, but he's already in his late 30s or 40s or even 50s, and he's still trying to make all that happen. And one of the ways that they compensate for that is to buy items that generally display superior status. So, and it can be a BMW. It doesn't matter. That's a preference of status symbol. Mercedes, all that kind of stuff, and those are the guys that I don't want to deal with. And it has nothing to do with black. I have hundreds of black clients. It's not to deal with that. It has to deal with people who want to be cool. And if you want to learn more about that, you can listen to the YMH podcast. And the Christina and Tom both make fun of cool guys on there. And I thought it was great that they sort of discovered the same phenomena that I discovered. So, but let's get on with the recones. These are just warnings that I'm going to warn you when dealing with JL clients. So the other 20% of the weirdos are well-to-do white people that are very intense. They're very they have like no control over their OCDs. They have more money than they have time, and they end up getting very picky. And that's why most of the time, I'll just turn them down flat. I'll just say, no thanks. And then they look out at all my woofer collection. They go, yeah, but you're an expert. And I go, that's my expert advice, is go buy a new one. I don't want to deal with you because I don't want to explain why this is a turd, right? And this is a 13W1 version 2, 8 ohm. This one is made in China. See right there, made in China. And this version uses a single slug. It's a little bit oversized. Looks like an inch and a looks. Okay, so I'll just have to splice that clip together. As a solicitor. So this is a 13W1 version 2, 8 ohm. And here it is. So typically the ones in China, they've moved to a rivet system, which I don't know if you can see it out there, that press right there, that green one. Let me zoom in. This thing, that's what they were using at Concept to rivet the 1.0. That's what they were doing to the top plates. So what they do is they press, kapoosh. Sometimes they do one at a time. On a larger press, they'll do all of them at a time. And what they do is they bond it to the top plate, and then they add the whole thing later with a shim, and then they magnetize it, because you don't want to deal with this when it's live. There's a couple things that I noticed about these. This is a 10W3 version 3, the 4 ohm. This one says made in USA. All the rest of these say made in USA. 12W3 version 3, 13W3. And you can see the sizes. This one is a little different because this one's missing the boot, but it's pretty much the same size. Someone had also made a comment about, one of the things that I'm known for is adding lots of magnets to a motor. And a lot of people hear from people like Jacob from Sundown, where, of course he talks out both sides of his mouth because he talks shit about me, but then copies me. Like, he's a piece of shit. That's all. That's my opinion. So, but I want you to do your own research and your own things so that you can learn the truth. Because people like Jacob and really any dealer, they're going to tell you whatever. They don't care about lying to you. Okay? So even JL doesn't care about lying to you. It's one of those, like, how do you slice it? How do you describe this? It's not really a lie, but it is. And so that's one of the reasons why I started the robot, I wanted the truth. I wanted to know. Is there a God? Well, that's the wrong question. The right question is, does it matter? And no, it doesn't matter. So you don't have to ask that question anymore. But so this is the W113, very small. What you'll see a lot of times is they'll use like last year's upsize. Like this is probably what used to be a W3, and then when they upgraded all the series, they what used to be a W3 is now like a W1, and what used to be a W1 is now a W0, and that's on a good year. On a bad year, what they'll do is they'll go the other way. Like what used to be, and Rockford, I've seen Rockford do this as well. What used to be a P1 is now like the R series, the Prime series, they go back and forth. So, and you can see that in the evolution of like, just pick one, like the P1. P1s actually used to be pretty good. They would have a nice standard 2-inch voice coil, and then all of a sudden they went down to like 1.5, and it was like real janky, and you know, just everything is cheaper. Again, this is when they leverage the brand and they try to give you something less than what they used to, and but they charge the same or even charge more, and you'll see this a lot of times whenever the brand changes hands. So I saw this on multiple occasions, like in the brand Sunfire from Bob Carver. Originally, you know, the design was from Bob Carver, and he did that in sync and in coordination with T.C.O.Z. T.C.O.Z. is actually the engineer behind all that stuff. Bob has good ideas and he makes the final decision, but specifically on the driver design, T.C.O.Z. is the one that came up with those designs, and then Bob designed the amplifier. And just so you know, that amplifier does not do 2,800 watts. It's like a good 500 watts or 1,000 watts, depending on the model that you have. But again, Bob doesn't care about lying to you. So yeah, Bob Carver doesn't care about you. JL doesn't care about you. Nobody is here to educate you, especially not for free. Last time I checked, there was an acoustics program at Northwestern. But I have not looked into that in years. Most of the things you just have to learn by reading, studying, you know, things like Voice Coil magazine, which again, I can provide you with some copies for you to check out. Gracie, lay down. The other one was the Loudspeaker Industry Sourcebook. That's a good read, mostly just to find vendors. It's not really for information, even though, see, I can't remember. I think sometimes they have articles in there, but most of the articles that I read and most of the articles that I found that were most helpful, useful, were in the trade magazine, a speaker builder magazine, because I was more interested in the speaker end of it. They also have, this is the same company. It's called Audio Express. And it's like X and then press. And not like here, locally, there's a car audio shop called Audio Express. But Audio Express, and then I think they were affiliated with Old Colony Sound Labs. And I found them advertising through Parts Express. Parts Express sells the Loudspeaker Cookbook, which is made by Audio Express. And they would have tie-ins, advertising. Like, I remember this was in the 90s, where if you got a catalog from Parts Express, they would include one copy of the Speaker Builder magazine, if I remember right. And then they were like $8 or $9 a issue, which was quite expensive back in the day, but well worth it, because having to go to college and pay for something that may or may not work out is a waste of time. The other thing is that all the information is available, but it's a lot like going to the beach and your dad says, all the water you can drink, it's salt water, go for it. So it's important to understand where to look, and most of it is just using your common sense. So, and I'll go into, again, doing a lot of this stuff. So most loudspeakers are modular, meaning that, like, you know, this is just a what's called a magnetic assembly, also known as a motor. Technically, it's not a motor until the coil goes in, but whatever. That's what the slang term is for this device. And what it is just a charged piece of ferrite. I think ferrite is it's probably a brand of what's also known as powdered iron. And then there's just some mild steel that it's epoxied to. There's a couple of different epoxies that you can use. You just want to use a strong one that's typically has high temperature. All of them are temperature rated at right around 400 500 Fahrenheit. That's when the glues fail and you start to see shifts and things like that. So this is the positive, this is the negative, And in between, that's where the coil floats, and you get a speaker, loudspeaker, when you send a signal through it. It's incredibly inefficient, but that's the best that we have right now. So that's, until we get into the Star Trek times, this is all we got. I'd love to be on the, been watching a lot of Area 51, and I forget what's his name, Dr. what's his face that worked there, Green or whatever. I love to get on a spaceship and figure out, you know, just to see what they're doing for speakers and sound system on the spaceships. But I wanted to show you a couple different versions. This is a different version than this, even though they're basically the same motor. This is the 10-inch. This is the 12-inch. This one, as you can see, it has a pole. I don't know if you can see down in there, but there's a bolt at the very end. And so what that tells me is that this was simply fastened with a bolt from the back of it. You could confirm that by pulling this decal off, and then there would be a screw right there. So, and they may have, again, this JL doesn't owe you anything, okay? They don't owe you any information. They don't even owe you more than a 1-year warranty. And even that 1-year warranty is only based on defects, not on abuse. And so, but you'll see different revisions, different versions. Typically, a version is a much greater change. And I just gave away the last W6 that I had. It was a version 1. When you look at those things, they're very basic, very simple. We're talking about a non-badged rubber boot around the magnet. Some of them didn't even come with a boot way back in the days, in the 90s. They just used a Mylar decal, and at the bottom it says Made in USA. And it doesn't even say impedance. It doesn't do any of that stuff. It doesn't even say JL audio and then have the little trademark. Again, I don't want to deal with all that stuff, so I just give it away to students and also to people that just want to get into this. I'm like, the best thing you can do is be an expert at this one thing if you really want to master this one thing. So well, we went through some of the voice coil stuff. There are some voice coils on Lord of Bass, but you just got to do your gap dimensions, and you can watch. I'll put a link in the description of the gap dimensions video. The other thing that I don't cover in the gap dimensions video is measuring bolt hole circle, and I've covered this in a couple of them. Basically, you're measuring from this hole to this hole. You want to know the furthest distance. Don't go into measuring this to this. Just don't. Measure from center to center, or from, if you're looking at it like this, it'll be from left to left. So the left side of the hole to the left side of the hole, and that'll give you the diameter. Typically what you're going to find is, especially in products like these, modern products, is they're going to be going on metric standards. So it'll be like 130 millimeter or 135 millimeter, or whatever it is. You only see some of that weirdo stuff, like it'll be like one of the coils that we measured earlier for the W6 was like 63 millimeter is what we were looking for. You're like, well, why would they make a 63 millimeter? Well, it turns out that's right at 2.5 inches. So some of the older stuff is going to deal with American standards, because a lot of the American standards were, a lot of the stuff was made in America. It's funny, I remember working with the Van Ree boys there at Precision Econowine, and they kept nagging me to use SAE, and I was like, no. I was like, the rest of the world uses metric. You guys should be using metric. And it's funny, even with my machine shop guys, I just continue to use metric and then let them do the conversion. If you want to do the conversion and you can do all that, 1/100ths of an inch, go for it. I don't give a shit. But to me, it's 85.5 millimeters. There you go, whatever it is. But so the bolt hole circle is this part. And like I said, in the cheaper versions, typically they just use rivets. And in the better ones, and it's not necessarily better, just they haven't gotten to this point yet. Also, there's limitations on this, on how big you can go. Typically, the biggest you can go is about this. And anytime they use the riveting system, it's always with a steel frame. You cannot rivet aluminum. It's too soft, it's too brittle, and it'll fracture under that kind of pressure unless you have some sort of magic way to do it. But either way, a steel frame is much, much cheaper to produce than a cast aluminum frame. Yes, they do make cast iron frames for a while. they're not really good because they cause weird problems, and they're very heavy, and it's just kind of dumb. Also, yeah. Anyway, there's you have to get the metal up to a much higher temperature and all this other stuff. So, anyways, I don't want to get into that. So, but these things are modular in that you can use this as long as you match up the bolt hole circle, and you don't even need to use all 6 bolts. Some of them, like on the W6, they use 5 bolts, 5-bolt pattern, which just makes it a little harder to guess what it is. But when you're programming the CNC machine, it doesn't care. It says what's the diameter. You put in the diameter, and then you say how many positions, and it's 4 holes, 5 holes, 6 holes, 7 holes, whatever you want to do, and it'll evenly distribute them in that bolt hole circle, BHC. You can put again, typically the threads that you're going to find on these JL products are all going to be metric, because a lot of these parts are made in China. I know it says made in USA, but that if you read the fine print, it says sometimes it'll say assembled in USA, sometimes it'll say manufactured in USA, and you start to get into weird definitions of what that means as far as they're concerned. So to a civilian, like just a regular person, again, I don't like to use the word person because what it means legally, a typical human being that is not in the industry and is not under any sort of corporate yoke or obligation, the way you describe things is a little bit different. Anyways, bolt hole circle, metric. These will be metric, and then you can drill. I've talked about this before about adding patterns to different frames. The frame doesn't care what pattern's on it. If it doesn't have the pattern you want, you can add it. Well, that's what I was talking about, was you don't have to use all 6 bolts. There have been many times where I've opened up T.C.O.Z, Phi, Kicker, and sometimes like I've seen on T.C.O.Z, they just use 3. If the motor's real light, like this is actually pretty light, relatively light, you could use a cast frame and use 3 bolts and it's fine. I've seen Kicker and Phi both use 4 right there, those 4. You don't want to do like this 4. You don't want to do just those. You want to do like it's evenly spacing, so it evenly distributes the weight. Why they do that, I think some of it is it's not really a parts savings, even though you save, whatever it is, 10 cents, 10 cents. I think it's more of a time thing. Sometimes if you're doing a run and you're just short on hardware, I've talked about that before in production. You don't have the hardware that you want, or somebody didn't order more when they were supposed to order more. That's why on the production that you see for the old Orion HCCA that was done by T.C.O.Z, typically they used a very specific hardware. It was like a Torx, and it was it was American standard. It was a quarter 20s, and you're like, why would they use a Torx on this thing? Some of them I even saw a Torx with a security nipple. So you need a very special security Torx bit to access it. And you're like, why would somebody want a security bit for to fasten a woofer motor? It's just because they ran out of hardware, and they didn't want to do what I do, which is like, I'm like, fuck it, Phillips, Hex, Torx, like I don't care, I just get the job done. But when you're doing fancy pants production and you're selling these woofers for $600 each, you want to have some sort of standards to back up things, because eventually some hillbilly's gonna is worth $10 million is gonna open it up, and then he gets mad, feels ripped off. What kind of shit is this? Blah, 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 blah. Me personally, I've been called those things many times, because now, did they buy the woofer for $69 or $70 or $100? Yeah. So I don't give a shit. Go fuck yourself. Did it get the job done? Did it die from defects, or did it die from abuse? 9 times out of 10, it died from abuse. And the dumb hillbillies don't care either way. They feel usually drunk, and they're like, oh, we were out on the lake and my Sunday was ruined because this woofer was cheap and garbage. And it's not that it was cheap and garbage, it's just it was being abused. So again, fighting ignorance and fighting stupidity. There are no race involved with that, no color, no creed. Stupid comes in all colors. That's one of the first things I learned in the military. The best thing you can do is surround yourself with quality people that want to do a good job and have good hearts. So, but let's see, modular. So yeah, you could turn this into an 8 if you wanted. The only thing you got to look out for is voice coil size versus spider size. The smaller the frame, typically the smaller the spider. So like on Lord of Bass has 8-inch frames, right? Those big ones. It's probably the biggest one you could probably get. It still only has like, I think, a 5 1/4, maybe a 6-inch spider. That's just the mechanical limits. And so if you only have a 6-inch spider, you only want to use like a 2-inch coil, maybe a 2.5 max. You don't want to do a 3 because then you don't have any suspension for it to move. And the whole point is to get this thing to move. So it's one of those things where like, Rockford used a 4-inch coil and an 8-inch spider. And they were able to, tout that their woofer does, it's conservatively rated at 1,000 watts, and they rated it at 2,000 watts max. I'm talking about the Power HX2. But it only used an 8.5-inch spider, so it would limit the excursion. And then on top of that, relative to the motor size, they could have used a longer coil, but they didn't. So they just used a 40 millimeter wind height. Again, the best thing that I suggest is just pull apart a bunch of woofers and study how they were built, study where they glued stuff, how they glued stuff. You can find out all this stuff by watching my old videos. Just for the knowledge, watch them in series, like go back to the beginning, watch all the dumb woofer porn ones, and then those are real short, whatever. And then you start getting into the technical videos and things like that. Just watch those videos and learn something. What else are you going to do? But let's see what else. So the woofer doesn't really care what size it is. It just knows that it has a voice coil that fits. It floats in here. It has a certain size suspension, right? Lower suspension, which is also known as the spider. And then it has an upper suspension. One of the things that we talked about today was the way that JL engineers tend to design the woofer to wear out the surround first. And that is purposeful. That what happens is like especially on the W6 series. So the W6 series, their weak spot is the surround. Now on the version 3, they've made it a little bit bigger, and they've also made it out of rubber, so it's a bit more tough. But back in the version 1, version 2, it was just a polycone with a foam surround. And so what would happen is when that thing's moving, it would stretch out the surround and it would prematurely rot. And again, they don't really care because it lasts a year. And then, if you're cool, right? If you're a cool guy, you're just going to buy a new one. And that's how they market their stuff. I don't agree with that, but that's how they do it. So, and that's why I try to do something different. What you really want to do is when you're designing a woofer is have the thing that's tougher, which is the spider, be the control mechanism that limits the excursion. The other way that you can do it is use, like I described earlier with the Rockford Power HX2, and also I described it in the Wolfram, the first series AG, the first series gold stuff, which was where it used the TI frame, but it was a short coil. So what happens is your excursion is limited. Kicker does this too. That's actually a safety. I don't want to say a safety. What it does is it keeps it from blowing because it loses a lot of BL, it loses a lot of stroke, but you'll see that fucking coil go at a certain point, and it's just flopping around. And typically that's when people turn it down. They go, oh, it's not getting any louder. Maybe I should turn it down. And that's actually a protection mechanism. If you want full performance through the stroke, what you do is you use a longer coil. And but then what happens is people again ask, they'll plow in 500, 1,000 watts to this thing, and it's not really made for that. It cannot get rid of the heat. It cannot dissipate it. It doesn't even have a vented pole. Even though it has like an indent, like they were gonna vent the pole, but maybe they changed their mind. There's a bolt at the bottom of this, by the way. That was the other thing I was talking about, was that thing is just bolted together. The best way to do it is actually forge, or in high quality ones, they do a thermal press fit, and then they go back and polish the line away from like that. I did some more, what was his name? Nathan Funk of Funky Waves up there in Canada. He did some really good steel work for me when we did our first series of Mac stuff, and I did 5 magnets and all that kind of shit. And he gave me, I think there's an old video showing on it, and he did that work for me, and it was fucking amazing. And that's really the way it should be done. But because again, these are meant to be profit makers, money makers. And JL has decided to, they'll call it refine. What they really have done is they've boiled it down to its essence of what is necessary, what isn't, and then they only want to put the elements in there that are necessary in order to achieve the goal, which is bass. But they try to put in the cost savings as much as possible. For some people that are designing woofers or people that recon woofers, you're like, they did all that over a nickel? Yes, the reason why they do that all over a nickel is because they're doing 10,000, 20,000 pieces at a time, and 20,000 nickels is a nice chunk of change, right? You're talking about maybe 3, 4, 6 workers, round trip airfare, all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that rich people do. Eat a baby, whatever. Let me get some gum in here. Sure he's got the right idea. So, again, go to do the gap dimensions video that shows you to measure the outer diameter of the pole, the inner diameter of the top washer. Typically, you want to measure in metric, and then what you have to account for. Now, this is another thing that came up when I was talking to the reconer. I'm trying to teach him stuff, which is that you can measure all you want, but if your measurements are off, it doesn't matter. So one of the things that he was having trouble with was sourcing coils. And I said, well, first of all, JL doesn't owe you anything. The other thing is that it's difficult to source stuff here, especially when they make it overseas anyway. And so then you need somebody like either me or George Campos at Lord of Bass in order to import them, or in the case of the JL Audio version 1, version 2, he actually was at the auction of I think it was either the second or third company that was building made in USA woofers for JL, and he was at that auction. They asked me if I wanted to go. I was like, nope. I had just landed the concept deal, and so I was up to my gills. I was also flat broke. And so I didn't have any money to go anyway. But you have to depend on them in order to provide parts. Otherwise, you have to do your own modifications. Now, I don't really get them anymore, but there was a lot of guys from other countries. South Africa, Jamaica is very popular, where the guys will actually make their own coils. You can make your own coil. I don't recommend it. I just, this is a great motor. If used properly, and there's plenty of money to be made. I'm sure this is the W3. Yeah, this is the W3. So this is like, I think they sell this for $500. So, and production cost on this probably under 20, maybe 20, to get fully made from China. Now, if you're doing assembly here, then it might go up to 25, but there's things that you can do to that they do in production to save money in one place, but because of logistics, meaning the coordination of product, the coordination of blueprints, the coordination of drawings, the coordination of changes, sometimes doesn't make it down the chain. Now, I've worked for several larger companies. They're still considered mid-size. But one of them that I worked for was called SpeedFam, and later they were consumed by IPEC. And I used to build wafer polishers for the semiconductor industry. And there was a lot of engineers, and there was a lot of wrong, bad stuff that these guys were doing. But because nobody wanted to be fired, nobody was ever responsible for the changes or the mistakes that we saw. Now, not all the mistakes are in engineering. Some of them are interpretation at the factory. Some of them, they just get wrong. And so that's why sometimes you want to import like just the motor and then do the assembly here. Sometimes you've been able to source something here and you want to use those as part of the production run. There's all kinds of reasons. The point that I want to make though is that one of the clause fine print that you see in websites and all that kind of stuff and brands like it's all of them. It's not just JL, but they'll say specifications are subject to changes without notice, and that means a lot of things. Sometimes it's somebody didn't talk to somebody else. Oh, you ordered 1,000 units. Sometimes the factory fucks up. Sometimes there's all kinds of reasons for that. Most of it is just about to have the freedom. And again, they don't owe you anything. They don't need to teach you anything. But this guy that was learning reconing from me, he was asking all kinds of questions, and he's like, "Well, what coil? This motor uses which coil?" And I was like, "Look, I don't know. I didn't memorize all of them." Some companies that are much smaller, like say Sundown, that's easy to memorize, right? I have all the models. Now, when I first got exposed to Sundown, I was like, "Who is this Sundown?" Whatever. And then I had to get my hands on their product, and I could see what they were doing. And all these manufacturing, all of them go through manufacturing phases and revisions. And Phi is probably the most known for performance bumping, which is where like last year's Q model will now be the Q plus or whatever. And I still don't understand Scott's nomenclature for his models, but that's the way he goes. And then Rusty does the same thing with what was last year's level 1 is now level 0. And then what used to be level 2 is now level 1 and all that kind of stuff. And so it all just kind of bumps up the chain. And then you have the top woofer, which is his level 6. PSI does the same thing. PSI is super tiny micro like me, where we source stuff from China, and I learned a lot of stuff from David Moore of PSI, and his sister brand called FixMySpeaker.com. Don't make it too complicated. Use open source stuff. Don't do proprietary stuff. I've talked about this before too, about when Sundown, which was Jacob, and then his partner Lemons. I forget his Nick Lemons. Nick Lemons. They share a building, and they've been good buddies forever. Nick's always been cool to me. Jacob's a dick, but Jacob's the alpha, right? Jacob's got the money. Jacob does the bigger sales and all that kind of stuff. So, but together they were able to share the platform, which means they share the repair parts on both the Stereo Integrity SQL and the Sundown SAV2. So that was a nice little thing that he did for Nick. And it also probably saved Nick some money because he didn't have to tool up his own thing or whatever. Again, I like to see what China already has going on for somebody else, and then buy that way. And again, I prefer open sources just because I don't like fooling with proprietary stuff. I don't think that belongs in the market. I think you're doing everyone a disservice. But again, sometimes that happens. And so my lesson to the guy that I was teaching today was that you have to do the same process over and over again. And when you're doing reconing, you'll have, and this has happened a lot, which is where like this is let's say this is a 12 W3 version 3, whatever it is, impedance. And this one is the same model. The sticker looks the same, everything looks the same, but the voice coils, the poles are different. Like this one is the old style, this one is the newer style. And they slightly changed the coil or whatever. You're going to see those kinds of changes. And so, and it sucks to be you because you have to be prepared excuse me, you have to be prepared for clients to come in. You know, they're like, hey, we're going out on the weekend. Can you have these woofers done by Thursday? Because we want to pick up on Friday and be out on the water. Sometimes that becomes very difficult to meet those kinds of demands. And so you may want to have extras already built, or ones, what they call carcass, which is basically your motor and your frame prepped and ready to go. That's what you see out here, all the shelves and stuff like that. Where Patrick has got those are all just carcasses. But that's actually the most expensive part to ship and the most expensive part to make. The rest of it is all just soft parts. And there are many choices that you can make on soft parts, depending on application and also what is available. So let me see. Somebody commented on, again, one of the things they criticized me for was having too many magnets, as if it doesn't make a difference. It does make a difference. So you can see here W1, W3, and then this is the W313. And then the more if you think of this is really a magnetic battery. That's really what it is. And you want to have and store more energy, then you need more ferrite until you use a different formula of magnetic material. That different formula in this case is neo, and there are several different grades of neo. I was just consulting on a product that came in, and they asked me to look at, and I looked at, and something I could tell on the BL number. The BL number was like 9 or 10, and I was like, that should be way higher for neo. And I looked through the specs, I couldn't see it, and then I asked him. I said, hey, are you using, N52 or N48, which is a formulation of neo? Those are typically more energy rich, more energy dense, and then there's trade-offs. Like the more energy rich and more energy dense that it is, the more susceptible it is to heat, and typically the Curry point is lower. That's just the way physics goes. Sometime until we figure out how the aliens are doing it, and then we can reverse engineer some cool speakers. But so it turned out they were using N35, and I said, well, that's a cost savings. Somebody was taking a shortcut there. I go, this is not just a run-of-the-mill product. This is not DS18. You want this to be a premium product, you're going to have to put N52 in there. The next best thing to N52 is N48. And if you're not, and they're like, well, what if they burn it up and saturate? Well, then they burn it up and saturate it. There's nothing you can do about people abusing equipment. The best thing you can do is just make it as best you can and then hope for the best. The other thing you can do is charge a lot. And that's where you see, like wet sounds? Wet sounds. Oh my God, I got to look at a lot of their stuff. Again, I'll do a whole video on wet sounds. I need to go through their website and look at their stuff and look at their marketing and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that they're, it's not that they're getting right, but the customers are using, and it's very, very, very expensive. But when there's no other choices, that's really kind of all they can do. Because a lot of guys, again, these rich hillbillies that come in and, they made their money in whatever, crypto or whatever. They're just dumb, and they have more money than they know what to do with, and they want to blow, $3 to 20 grand on a weekend at the dunes. They don't care. They just throw money at it because they have enough money. And so typically what happens is they just go, what's your best? And a lot of times they equate the best to the most expensive, even though that's not always the case. But in a retail setting, that is typically the case. And so that's where a brand like Wet Sounds comes in. And then when you look at their products, you're like, this is bad, this doesn't belong here. And these are just, they happen to be, sometimes it's being first to market. That's why they take off. Like when you look at some of the generic ass shit that JL did in the 90s, you're like, how did this company ever take off? Fucking cheap ass Mylar sticker that doesn't say impedance on it. Nowhere is there impedance marked on it. You just had to look it up. And again, there was no internet. So you couldn't look it up online. Sometimes they made the woofers dual 6, right? That probably could have been just a sourcing problem. Like they had a good deal on the motors, right? The steel, and then they have to find a coil that fits. And the only one that they could find that fits is, say, a dual 6. And so then they have to figure out how to turn lemons into lemonades, right? And so then that's when they came up with the tri thing, where they would wire 3 of those in series parallel to get a 4 ohm load, which at the time was what, that's the lowest you could run an amplifier on, typical amplifier. That was, again, this is before Class D. This is before all of that stuff. We're talking about late 80s, early 90s, even before 94, 95. Class D was nowhere to be seen at that time. So, and then JL then outsourced basically a fiberglass flange that they had somebody else make, and then they'd make them in 4 different colors, 6 different colors, or whatever it was, and then you'd order them, you'd overpay, and all that kind of stuff. But that was how JL did it. It was just coming up with one gimmick after another. Some of it is being to market first. You don't want to go on the assumption that JL is the best. Like, I would love to hear stories from people that have worked there on a lot of the fuck ups that happen. And this happens in all of manufacturing. It's not just, low-level companies. And when you look at it on a broader perspective, JL is not a big company. It's a very tiny, tiny speck. Now, in the audio industry, and specifically the car audio and the marine industry, it's definitely there, and they do a lot of money. But as far as like CE, meaning consumer electronics, it's a sneeze, it's a queef, it's a nobody when you get on that scale. But anyways, again, if you're going to be doing these woofers, it's important to know. You don't have to memorize, but it helps save time. And then the other thing is starting to source your own products. I can help you source products, source coils. If you want to do a batch of coils, if you want to get seriously into this, I don't really want to do the thing with like to compete against George. Sometimes I'll order parts and then I don't advertise it because, like, for example, out there I have about 300 Rockford P3s, which are it's a perfectly good woofer. Right now they're retailing for about maybe $240. When I rebuild them, I'll sell them for like $120, $150, something like that. And then I'll have only like $40 to $60 invested in each one. So that's a good ROI, return on investment, which is fine enough for me. But if you really want to get into the high dollar thing, what you really want to try to do, and you guys can also achieve this if you work together. If you get like 4 or 5 or even 10 of you guys together, of course, in different parts of the country, so that way you can manage your local territory of JL product. But there's nothing stopping you from working as like a guild. The problem that I found in doing group buys is that there are not trustworthy people. And so one example of this was Murphy of Tantric Audio. He was just one guy, and he ended up burning a whole bunch of people. The other one was Craig. That was Speaker Parts. Was it speakerparts.net? Speakerparts.com. He was having George at Loader Base dropship for him, and he was also buying product from Sundown and retailing it, which is like a big no-no in the Sundown circle. And then he ended up screwing a bunch of people out of that. So the problem is just finding someone that has enough time or money to do this full time, and then is also trustworthy. That's where I come in. It's super easy to me to come into a market like car audio when all there is sharks and terrible people. All I have to do is just be honest and not a terrible person. And I'm successful, which I really like. And I get to sleep at night, and I get to help people, and I get to feel good, and all that kind of stuff. So, and you're going to have to, it's a tightrope when you're dealing with high-end, picky customers. And it also depends on your personality. If you're okay dealing with, Alex Hermosi, shout out to him. Does 100 million or 200 million a year, whatever he does in revenue. Good job. Most of that though is just like invisible goods. It's not like physical stuff. One of the things that Alex talks about, I watch him, I listen to him, and I apply what applies to me. One of the things he talked about was if you really want to be rich, you should solve rich people problems. This is one of the rich people problems. The real issue that you find is that the genuinely rich people do not even bother with this. They'll throw this in the garbage, right? Or they'll, what I've seen a lot, which is they act like they're rich, but then they come back and bitch like little whiny cunts to the dealership, and they go, this woofer didn't last, and then they want a free one. They're like, I paid blah, 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 plus tax, and then they'll complain about it. And a lot of times, JL will give the dealer a lot of slack, as long as they send back, I think I pulled them out. JL was one of the first people, them in Rockford, they put a barcode on the inside. I think Rockford actually puts a barcode now on the voice coil. And they do what's called field destroy, where they have either a rep or you film it, or you cut it, you show the barcode to document it, and then you throw the whole thing away or give it to somebody like me. And then what happens is the jail will send you new ones, right? And jail really, for the most part, doesn't mind doing that because, again, production cost is under $20 for a W3, and they're wholesaling it to the dealer for, the assumption is 50 points. So if the retail on it is $500, then even if it's a small dealer, they're going to wholesale it to them for about $200 to $250. And so that way they can double their money. And the cities and municipalities are happy with this because then they get to taxed on the highest number. So they're fine with this system as well. But so anyways, JL doesn't really mind because, again, their production cost is $20 and then they're selling it for $200. So that's a pretty good margin for them, even if they have to give a couple away. See how that works? And now if they do get concerned, like they keep getting returns on this specific item, there might be user error, a lot of user error, and you have to figure out, maybe the user is using it improperly. Like I've seen, we've gotten some of these back where they're just like charred or the coil's stuck in them and there's nothing you can do. And it's because people are running 1,000 watts through the woofer like this, and it should not be that way. And but again, you're going to see that. So again, I don't want to deal with JL people. I'd rather not. I like people that want to be smart, but they're not. They're good people because typically what you see in our society is people that are typically rich. It isn't because they're nice. Does that make sense? Typically, it's because they've either figured out a niche and they've exploited it, or they figured out a way to take advantage of someone or something, and they're just like, well, we'll just keep this a secret, when really they're like smuggling children or something like that. And it pays really well. And again, it doesn't take brains to smuggle children. And so that makes good money, and then that's what you see. So, and I've had my share of clients like that. I told you guys this story before, which was that I had this dumb kid that was in my neighborhood at the old place, and I just didn't like him. He was bad news. He was hanging out with the wrong people. He was doing the wrong shit. All I did was criticize him because he was a fuck up. He was a piece of shit. Well, he grew up and he got a job, and then he showed up to my place and he had like $3,000 to spend. And, it seemed like he was making good changes, and, he got this job with an air conditioning company. He went and got certified for air conditioner. And what you find out is anytime you get certified with for AC controls and all that kind of stuff, that's not what the company wants you to do. What the company wants you to do is go out there and sell them an air conditioner, even if they don't need one, because the most margin and the most profit is made on that transaction, not on servicing their old one and being honest with them. See how that works? And then, in fact, you can even charge the customer to remove the old one. Like they'll charge them $250. They go, oh, well, there's a core charge, blah, blah, blah. And so you're actually charging the customer $250 to $300 to remove the old one. And then if you do any refurbishment, you can do refurbishment. Again, there's nothing really complicated about air conditioners. It's just, whatever. I don't want to get into that. But and then they'll turn around and sell that one anywhere from 800, 400, whatever it is. It's a huge profit considering that they got paid to remove it. Sometimes I've seen where even the air conditioning company will give that to the tech as like a tip, right? Like when you go bass fishing, when you go out there, big deep sea fishing, a lot of times you cut the fillets that you want on this, 600-pound tuna that you caught, and then you give the head and the rest of it to the captain, and he's a working guy. He'll go sell that to his neighbors, his family. That's like, because what are you going to do with? You're going to tow around a head with you? No, you're going to take your cut fillets. You're going to go freeze them or give them out to your friends. You're the rich person. He's the poor person. But everybody works out, and it's good in the end. So, but man, I took you guys on a trip on that one. As far as design goes, though, let's see. I already covered JL engineering. There refers to wear out willfully, especially like on the W6 where they have like a 9-inch spider and then a very tiny surround, and that's to make the surround weak. You can make better improvements on it. The problem that you're going to run into though is when you make those improvements, if you don't execute well and you don't have a good reputation, many people will judge you and call you a hack because you weren't able to get the original parts. Well, what they don't know is that the original parts are not available. They're just not available. Now, you take somebody like David Moore of PSI, fixmyspeaker.com. He actually either found the source or he tooled it up himself to get the dust caps made for, I think he has the ones for the W7s, maybe even the W6s. And you can buy, it's not a quote unquote genuine JL part, but it's probably made from the same tool. And he's probably doing what I done, which was that I found the vendor, and JL had already abandoned that vendor. And so by default, by de facto, that's, an abandoned tool. And JL probably hosed him on a bunch of, money. And so typically the factory or whoever owns the tooling will, they're like, fuck him, fuck JL, let's go make some money. And then they'll find somebody like me. And then I start importing those parts that don't exist on the market. And again, David controls that little niche of the market, and it probably makes him a lot of good money. The only thing you got to come up with is the badges. And I found that guy on eBay that actually sells the badge that goes on the dust cap. The ones that he have are the AE versions, the anniversary edition. They have a little bit of yellow in them, I think yellow and silver or whatever it is. Again, that's just a piece of plastic. And if you can knock that off or get it made, fucking do it. It's free money for you. If you can find the source, the original source, and then whether the factory is just doesn't care, or you find someone in there that's willing to steal, they're definitely not supposed to do that. But a lot of times parts just find their way out on the market. Sometimes China gets burned. Sometimes they share secrets. Like I watched AVE, the guy that I emulate on my style of videos. He got the knockoff Makita drill. And the knockoff version was actually better than the original Makita version. And the batteries were cheaper, the guns were cheaper, everything was awesome. And all it took was, again, sometimes, typically the brand, like in this case it's Makita, does something wrong, right? Like the recession comes and they file bankruptcy under the import-export company that they were using to import the tools. That company files for bankruptcy, and that was the one that owned the tooling and owned, whatever, the proprietary trademarks and all that kind of stuff over in China. That's a separate entity, that's a separate division, blah, blah, blah. That entity will file for bankruptcy, and then they'll come back again and they go, hey, we're back, we're up and running with this other brand. You should work with this other import-export company that they have it. And they do that to isolate themselves from problems, from lawsuits, and all kinds of things. That's one of the reasons why you should have an LLC, is that the entity does business, not you, so that they go after the entity. And there's all kinds of tricks and stuff like that. Again, I recommend watching YouTube, not YouTube, TikTok for that kind of stuff, on how to make your real quick tip. I'll fucking say it because it's really valuable, which is when and if you do get an LLC, what you want to do, first thing you do is put it into debt. And all you have to do is have a note that's certified. And when I say the word note, I'm talking about a debt instrument, not like a fucking parental note. For lack of a better description, it's just an IOU. But what you do is you put that LLC into debt, probably right around $500,000 or even $1 million, depending on how big you are. And then what happens is, if somebody does hurt themselves or wants to sue, first in line, first in time. So is that right? First in line, first in time. Meaning what happens is, if let's say they come after you, and you have insurance, and the insurance pays out $100,000, but they want more, and it's their right to sue, and they sue, and come to find out the company, the LLC, is already in debt $600,000 and is working to pay that off. Right? It's not real debt, but it doesn't matter. It was first in line, so it's first in time. So the company has to pay that debt off first before they can pay any other debts, even if it's a judgment against them. And typically, if you make that number large enough, it's just not worth it. And so what do you know? You don't get sued. But typically, you want to make the debt larger than what the assets are worth under the LLC. So, but anyways, that's really valuable information when doing business and things like that, because nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. They only care about themselves, and they only care about me. And I'm going to be late for the weekend, and I want to have fun, and I want to do cocaine, and I want to fuck a bunch of prostitutes and not get AIDS, and I don't care if I'm married, and you can judge me and all this kind of stuff. Those are the people that you're going to be dealing with when you deal with JL Audio. So again, I don't want to deal with those people, so that's why I do what I do. I think that's good. I answered a lot of questions, and this is a long fucking video, and this is the third part I'm going to have to glue together with the other two parts. But basically, ask your questions in the comments. If I don't address it through the comment section, what I do is I just write it down, and then I do a long ass video like this, and I address all the comments. So anyways, yeah, those are a lot of the problems associated with doing JL Audio type recones, especially on an item like this. Is it worth $500? Yes, but only from a JL dealer. Now, if you can create a copy that's as good or better, or, people trust you enough to say, well, this is like PSI. So like David Moore, they go, oh, this is PSI soft parts, then it works. It works that way, because David will say it's better. Is it better? Sure, it's better. It has a less tendency to blow. Because David removes all the safety features. He also removes a lot of the stuff that stifles the performance, and some other things, like he uses a paper cone, which is stronger than a polycone. And then you just do a blank dust cap and then a decal. And that's whatever, that's JL. I do the same thing, but I just get tired of people complaining, and that's why I sit on a big pile of W6 motors, and I just wait for somebody to go, I want a W6. And so then I go, this is what I can do. And I show them my version, and I say it's as good or better. I back it up with a 3-year warranty, and I can customize it for you. Sometimes that's a go for these guys, and I will charge them $300 a woofer, and I don't mind doing that, because that's what they want, and they love me, and they, whatever. They want to fucking deep throat my wiener, I'm going to let them deep throat my wiener. So you don't have to feel guilty about doing that. Even when your mom tells you that your success is only because you don't have children, just be proud that she knows that you're successful. That's all I can say. But yeah, as far as coming up with parts and things like that from China, it just becomes very difficult. And if you don't strike it, I don't want to say strike it rich, but strike it lucky, like I did with the gaskets on the W0, a lot of the spacers and things like that, like on some of the other ones, the stamp frames, they'll buy a generic stamp frame, but then they, like JL, will powder coat it in that nice shiny silver color, and it makes it look luxurious rather than just a black steel that's been either electropainted real thin or just like even just fucking spray paint. And then they'll put like a plastic adapter on there so it takes a bigger spider. So I've seen that on a couple of their fixes. What's funny is when I do that, people go, "Oh, that's janky," and I go, "This is exactly what JL did." When they do the sky wires, right? When they do the leads coming in from here directly into the cone, that is, to me, that's janky and bullshit. But that's exactly what JL does. So somehow when they do it and they put that nice shiny, dust cap on, or the cone, or however they put it together, it's magic. And they're able to sell the W1 for $300, the W3 for $500, and then the W6 for $800 or $900, and then the W7 for, well, the top end one is like $1,800. So that's the magic. That's the magic of marketing. But I'll do some more videos. I love you guys. It's Sunday. Be nice to each other, and don't get the Monday scaries. You're okay. Just breathe deep, and it's not going to be forever. You'll be dead soon. Love you. Bye.